carpet's on fire. Don't touch me, I'm a real live wire. Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Better run, 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 run away. Oh.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Terror Obscura, the show where we look at the best and worst horror has to offer. I'm your host, the Fear Fan, and thanks for tuning in. Well, when it comes to horror series, as with anything else, all good things come to an end. Whether a series decides to pull out all the stops and end things at the top of their game, or simply decides to ride that gravy train till the wheels come off, eventually the time comes for a franchise to take its final bow and close up shop for good. And after 3 solid successes, Paramount finally decided that it was time for Jason Voorhees to hang up his machete for good. Thankfully, rather than just driving him out to the country, kicking him out and telling him, "Go on boy, you're free," they decided to send everyone's favorite masked murderer out in style. And that brings us to today's subject, Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Oddly enough, if Paramount had gone through with their original plans to end the series, the final chapter wouldn't exist. Originally, Part 3 was meant to be the end of the franchise, with the studio even going so far as to scrap several alternate endings where Jason survived in favor of one where he and a former victim bury the hatchet. Still, the fact that they hadn't actually said that it was going to be the last one, coupled with the massive profits that Part 3 generated, meant that it wasn't very long before Paramount invoked the ancient and inviolable right of take-backsies. Still, I'm not kidding about them going all out on this one. As well as the by-now familiar budget bump, the director's chair was given to Joseph Zito, known for the awesome but tragically overlooked The Prowler. Well, that, and a movie called Blood Rage, whose description simply reads, "A sexually frustrated young man kills hookers." According to the critic's blurb on the back, a fun-filled romp for the whole family. And not only did Zito bring at least one impressive slasher film to the table, but he also brought something else. An old friend of the franchise, special effects legend Tom Savini. That's right, the very same man responsible for bringing Jason into the world would be the one taking him out of it again. But just because they were putting out a ton of extra effort on this one doesn't mean that things wouldn't end in disaster. And, as Freddy's Dead showed us, getting rid of a beloved horror icon is sometimes trickier than it looks. So, was all the extra hard work and preparation worth it? Or had Jason earned the shallow grave he was left in at the end of Part 3? There's only one way to know for sure, so let's tune in and find out. We begin, as we did in Part 2 and 3, with a recap of the previous movies in the series, because apparently the concept of man in scary mask decides to stab people, hijinks ensue, needs more elaboration. Plus, I'm pretty sure anyone who shows up to the 4th movie in the series, called the final chapter no less, has probably seen the first 3. Still, it does serve as a pretty good demo reel of Jason's greatest hits, so I guess you could count it as a nice bonus for those looking to get the most bang for their buck.
What the fuck?
Huh, a random explosion. That's weird. I didn't realize Michael Bay got involved with this series until the remake. So, with our vital exposition delivered and our pyrotechnics budget expended, we begin the movie proper as the Crystal Lake PD, probably considering changing their name to Crystal Lake Corpse Disposal after 2 straight days of mopping up after Jason, picks up the latest Voorheesian mess. Seriously, for anybody keeping a tally, I'm starting to wonder about the efficacy of Crystal Lake's finest. We've had over 20 murders in 2 days, and the cops have literally only managed to catch the killer after he was already dead. What, there's a serial killer on the loose, changing your town's murder rate from that of Pleasantville to that of Detroit? You didn't even close down the lake? Who the hell's running this town, the mayor from Jaws? And yes, for those of you keeping track, I did say 2 days running, and given that they're just now packing Jason up, that means that we've gone from Friday the 13th to Saturday the 14th to Sunday the 15th. Who would expect such inconsistency from a film called The Final Chapter, with 8 films left to go in the franchise? And speaking of consistency, after the Keystone Cops here finish cleaning up the Death Barn's final victim, for now at least, we see that the same level of stony-eyed professionalism they exhibit extends to the local morgue staff.
This your last? Got one more over there. Real cute girl. Was. Well, she still is. All you gotta do is go over there, take off your pants.
Nice talk, real nice talk.
Meet Axel, an ME who is quite possibly stiffer than his patients, at least from the waist down. Of course, that's not to say that he's not the romantic type, as after he's finished doing God knows what to his clientele, he invites his girlfriend back for a quiet evening of watching unnecessarily titillating exercise videos in a cold room full of dead people. Needless to say, she reacts in exactly the way you'd expect any self-respecting Friday the 13th character to.
I don't believe you, Axel.
Getting their first good night's sleep in a very long time. Local law enforcement.
And show of hands for anyone who's not surprised. Seriously, is there anyone in this series who isn't out to cop a feel? Guess not. So apparently being groped by the serial killer equivalent of the Elephant Man is a hard limit, and Hello Nurse zips up and schleps off to the dispensary, leaving Axel alone to practice his wrist exercises. Of course, he doesn't have to wait long before someone shows up to keep him company, since, in their infinite wisdom, nobody in the CLPD bothered to check Jason's pulse or breathing in the 24 hours he was in their possession, and apparently his autopsy mainly consisted of poking him with a stick and saying, "Yup, he's dead." Of course, Jason's innate sense of whenever someone's getting their rocks off is enough to bring him around, and he's apparently as eager as ever to cockblock his victims. Smooth move, Jason, but I'm pretty sure he was looking to get head, not give it. And for those of you wondering how Jason survived having an axe buried in his skull, the studio has offered up one and only one answer for his miraculous recovery. A whole lot of this! Hand waving aside, some would probably argue that Jason doesn't have too much going on upstairs anyway. Still, that doesn't stop him from putting the moves on Axel's newly single girlfriend by helping her unzip her dress. Yeah, I think your technique could use a little bit of work. Anyway, the next day, Monday the 16th, we finally get to meet some of our new main characters, Trish Jarvis and her mom, who, appropriately enough, will be referred to only as Mom. Together, they've recently moved to Crystal Lake after Mom's divorce from a character who I can only assume was named Dad. Also in attendance is the youngest member of the family, Tommy.
Oh, honey, get a haircut,
Oh, Ma.
What a twisted, wretched little gremlin.
Thanks.
Hey look, it's just Corey Feldman. What a twisted, wretched little gremlin. And before you start to worry, thinking we might be changing things up too much by focusing on a family rather than a random assemblage of teenage stereotypes, along comes a random assemblage of teenage stereotypes to save the day. Included in this particular carload of victims-to-be is Teddy, this group's standard issue horn dog, and Jimmy, their incredibly non-standard issue Crispin Glover. And for those of you who are wondering, yes, he will be playing his usual role as Crispin Glover.
I mean, that girl wanted to be treated right.
I treated her right. That's what's driving me so crazy.
Let me put in the old computer. Let's see. It says you're a dead fuck.
A dead fuck?
You know? Oh, God, I'm horny.
Alright, A, there's no way in hell the term dead fuck is ever catching on, no matter how much you want it to, and B, I've got to wonder what the locals are starting to think every time they see a carload of diverse idiots pass by. Well, shit, Gus, there goes another carload of teenagers. Best call the sheriff. Oh, looked like a Crispin Glover.
Really? How could you tell?
Well, he looked like kind of a dead fuck. Of course, our carload of idiots aren't the only ones having a bit of summer fun, and after passing the spot where they dump Pam Voorhees, we get a lighthearted bit where we see Jason teaching a hitchhiker how to make the perfect banana split. One part banana, one part ice cream, 2 parts murder. Still, I don't think you're supposed to make it inside of your throat. I don't know, is there a healthier selection on the menu?
No,
That is so wrong on so many levels. And while I desperately try to avoid thinking about what that particular recipe might entail, it's time to meet the rest of the cast. Vacationing at Crystal Lake this time are Doug and Paul, respectively the voice of reason, and a man who makes all of his relationship choices based on what direction his penis is pointing at any given moment. Also along for the fun of their girlfriend Sam, who apparently has a reputation as the village bicycle, and Sarah, who, as a slightly confused and awkward virgin, would normally be our de facto survivor girl. At least she would be, but something tells me that she has all the brains and survival instincts of the average lemming.
I don't know how you do it.
Crap, I knew we needed something more informative in that recap. Anybody care to explain it to her? How about you, part 3?
Well, first we take our clothes off, and then you get on top of me, or I could get on top of you.
Hopefully that cleared everything up.
Really?
Ugh, forget about it. Ask your friend, she can explain.
You do it with everybody.
Look, I got my reputation in the 6th grade.
Ugh, maybe she can explain a little bit too well. Of course, she's apparently not the only early starter around here, as we see Tommy getting an impromptu anatomy lesson from his new neighbors. Thanks, movie. I now know more than I ever wanted to about the sexual awakening of Corey Feldman. Of course, I can't really blame him, since the next day, Tuesday the 17th, the group meets the Doublemint twins here, Tina and Terry, whose primary personality traits include wearing slightly different pants so that you can tell them apart, and proving that it's almost impossible to avoid seeing them naked, since they'll take any excuse to get that way.
Come on in!
Oh, no. No, we have no suits. Skinny dip.
No, thanks. I think I'm overdressed.
Come on, Gordon, we're too young for this.
Look, I know everyone's obsessed with sex in this series, but isn't this getting a little ridiculous? I mean, come on, even the lake's jump scares are getting sexier. Not that I'm complaining, mind you, it definitely beats a topless Pamela Voorhees. Not what I had in mind, but still, my point stands. So, while the rest of the gang draws straws to see who's first on the chopping block, Trish and Tommy pick up their own new addition to the cast in the form of Rob, who might as well be called Red Herring.
What are you hunting for up here?
Bear. Anybody up at the lake today?
You can't be hunting for bear.
How about kids? Are any kids, vacationers, people like that?
Rob, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think you're supposed to be hunting them either. Wow, I could almost believe that he's the real killer. Or at least I could, if I ignored the fact that I'd already seen the killer in the 2 previous movies and watched him escape the morgue at the start of this one. Unless, of course, he's had plastic surgery like he did between parts 2 and 3. In which case, I've got to wonder, what's he going to look like by the time we get to the end of the series? And of course, there's an immediate attraction between him and Trish, because this series thinks that wanting to squish uglies counts as character development. Well, at least they didn't try to shoehorn in some other bullshit love triangle where somebody else competes for his affections.
Come on, I got something real neat to show you at my bedroom.
Not touching that joke with a 10-foot pole. So once they get back to their place, Tommy drags Rob up to their room, you're not making this easy for me movie, and shows him his admittedly awesome prop collection, which, in an interesting note, actually belongs to Tom Savini. Actually, it's kind of cool for them to flesh out one of the characters by giving us a glimpse into his hobbies and personal life. It's something you don't see too often in this series, especially where child actors are concerned. Let's see if they do it for anybody else.
Would you care to dance? It's good.
Wow, either he's dancing, or his character has epilepsy. Yes, ladies and gents, witness the glory that is Glover dance. The grace, the flow, the precision, every movement intricately choreographed to make him look like he's desperately trying to fight off both an invisible horde of ninja warriors and a swarm of angry, angry bees. Although, I've heard he was originally dancing to AC/DC's Back in Black. Who knows, maybe it works better set to that. Nope. Maybe something with a little bit more funk? Much better. And hey, who knows? Maybe his dancing improved later in life. And speaking of moves, it looks like Paul has a few of his own.
You like slow dancing?
I could learn to.
Kiss me, you fool.
Certainly.
Wow, that was a fast 180. I'd be careful, Paul, or you might just give yourself the world's first case of whiplash of the penis. Come on, dude, you don't want to dislocate your pelvis before Jason gets a hold of you. And speaking of Jason, we haven't heard from him in a while, so after she finally gets sick of Paul hitting on anything and everything with a pulse, Sam decides to ring the dinner bell with a bit of skinny dipping. Of course, it seems that her 6th grade reputation has preceded her, and it's not long before Jason shows up to give her a poke. Paul instantly senses that Jason is horning in on his lady, or maybe his penis has just changed its mind yet again, because he instantly drops Tina and heads out to the lake, either to win Sam back, or maybe to hit on Jason. Sadly, when he gets to the raft, he finds Sam dead on her feet, and shortly learns that there's a lot more to fear from this lake than just shrinkage. Oh no, not his penis! Who's going to make all of his decisions for him now? Of course, while Paul might be dead, it seems that his powers of hormonally driven thought live on in Tina, who immediately latches onto Jimmy like a lamprey.
That you wanted to be with Ted.
Well, I did. But now I want to be with you.
Wonder Twin powers activate. Form of a floozy! Of course, in keeping with Jimmy's essential Crispin Gloverness, she may have bitten off a bit more than she can chew.
This is a neat room.
This is, your room.
No, actually, it's Paul's room.
Dear God, first the dancing and now the world's worst pillow talk. Is everything this man does as awkward as humanly possible? Of course, not everyone's lucky enough to score a hot date, and Teddy, who's managed to strike out with both the girls, as well as a lamp, the audience, and probably his own right hand, decides that he might have a better chance with the vintage pornography he discovers on the premises. Needless to say, having romantic skills on a par with Axel from earlier does him no favors, and it isn't long before Terry wanders off to find that Tina is seeing if Jimmy really is a dead fuck. Sick of the fact that everyone around here seems to be interested only in laying pipe, she decides to head home before she too can get the shaft. Wonder Twin powers activate! Form of a corpse! Of course, not everyone reacts to Captain Ahab's porn collection the same way, and it's apparently just the sort of earth-shattering aphrodisiac Sarah needs to turn in her virgin card. Of course, while they're getting ready to party like it's 1929, Mom arrives back home, and befitting of a character who's been forgotten by the rest of the movie, gets the movie's prerequisite lame cutaway death. And no, we never will find out what happened to her. Hell, she's probably hanging out with Paul from part 2. And while it may be willing to leave some questions unanswered, let it never be said that the final chapter failed to answer the important questions.
Was I a dead fuck?
I think you were incredible.
Well, thank God that dangling plot thread got resolved. Any other deep and searching questions that need answering?
Ted! Hey, Ted, where the hell's the corkscrew?
Well, let it never be said that Jason isn't helpful. Also, Jimmy, now you're a dead fuck. And if there's any doubt that Jason's there to help, it's quickly put to rest when he shows up to escort Tina to her car. Aw, look, he even opened the windows for her. Less convinced of Jason's chivalrous nature is Rob, who, in a rather clever twist, turns out to be the brother of one of the girls who was killed over the last few days. He's been out in the woods hunting goalies instead of grizzlies, and he set up camp here in the hopes that Jason would be crashing the party. Which, when you think about it, actually means that the guy that's using other people as bait is A, the smartest man in the movie, and B, actually doing more than literally anyone else on the planet to stop Jason. Although, given that the rest of our characters are either wandering around a spooky basement with a flashlight, screwing their brains out in the shower, or hitting on the actors in their pornography in a fit of sexual desperation, that's actually not much of an accomplishment. Damn, and I thought the 3D effects in the last movie were good. I know that stuff's supposed to give you a splitting headache, but sheesh, bet he feels stupid for dropping the extra $3. And while Teddy's evening might be kind of a wash, some people are doing considerably better. In fact, maybe a bit too well.
Sarah, I think I'm in heaven.
I think I'm in love.
Moving a little bit fast there, aren't you, Sarah? Also, something tells me that you might not be entirely his type.
Hey, Paulie, is that you? Hey, Paulie. Whoops. Dropped my bar of softball, buddy. Let's get in here as the old pal. Ho, 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 ho.
No, bad Jason. If you're in the bathroom and you're into another boy, you're supposed to slip your foot under the stall like a Republican senator, not jam your hand through the wall. You know, I'm starting to think Rob was right about you. Of course, once Sarah comes back and discovers that Jason has literally banged Doug's brains out, she's understandably upset and decides to bug out before meeting an oncoming jump scare. Wow, and I thought she had great cleavage before, but now she has an axe in her chest. Anyway, with yet another fun trip to the lake ruin, we can finally get back to what little plot this movie has, as Rob and Trish make it back to the cabin. Before they can call Crystal Lake PD for yet another corpse pickup, Jason decides to play telephone repairman. Left with no choice but to try and handle the situation themselves, they decide to try and track down their companions with the help of their faithful dog, Gordon. A plan that works, perhaps a little too well. Damn it, Gordon, I know we told you to find Tina, but why can't you use the stairs like anybody else? Of course, thanks to Jason's penchant for redecorating his victims' houses after he's done with them, nice job by the way, but still not up to Leatherface's standards, it doesn't take them very long to find their former neighbors. Of course, while everyone else is just hanging around, Rob isn't resting on his laurels, instead choosing to play amateur electrician to get the lights back on. Unfortunately for him, Jason would rather play gardener. While it may not be the most graphic death in the movie, it's certainly the most descriptive. Thanks for letting us know what's going on, Rob. It's pretty dark in that basement. I might not have known he was killing you otherwise. Equally informed is Trish, who wisely decides to get the fuck out of there. Still, with Jason taking a page out of Better Homes and Corpses, getting out of the house isn't easy, and it's only some quick thinking on her part that allows her to escape. Why the hell didn't she do that? Once Trish makes it back to Tommy, the two begin barricading themselves inside. Of course, it isn't too long before Rob decides to try out the whole jumping through the window thing that's been so popular in this movie. Seriously, this is the third time. Not to be outdone, after Jason gets a little taste of what he gave Sheriff Beefy in Part 2, he pulls out his best Kool-Aid Man impression.
Oh yeah!
And you know, Jason, I'm starting to think you should probably walk away from this one. I mean, over the last 3 days, you've run into 3 separate groups of teens, and in each case you've had no problem up until the last one who's nearly killed you. Now I know you're not the brightest bulb in the box, but you can at least take a close look at your TV tropes. Close enough. So after Trish welcomes him to prime time, so to speak, the chase is on, and once she makes it to the other house, she finds herself trapped with only one way out. Come on, that's like the 4th time in this movie alone. And that's not even mentioning how many other times it's happened in the series. I don't know why I should be surprised. I mean, take a look at how the series started. You know what? Fuck the murder rate. I'm moving to Crystal Lake and getting a job as a glazer. You can seriously clean the fuck up. And while Trish takes her journey through the window glass, Tommy decides that, rather than running the hell away, it's time to put his supposed makeup expertise to work. Needless to say, Trish isn't too impressed that she's stuck entertaining their guest on her own. Eek. On one hand, that's gonna hurt like a bitch. On the other hand, he's going to be a huge hit if he goes to a Star Trek convention. Of course, Jason isn't really the live long and prosper sort, and he promptly tries to get down to business with Trish, only to be interrupted when Tommy demonstrates his amazing special effects wizardry.
Jason! Jason!
My God, the resemblance is uncanny. Although, given that the old sweater trick worked on him in part 2, part of me is starting to wonder if Jason is just really, really nearsighted. Either way, Jason either really is enthralled by Tommy's movie magic, or maybe he's just wondering how much TMZ will pay for photos of a shaved Corey Feldman, because he's distracted enough to let Trish sneak up on him and knock his mask off with the most half-ass machete swing I've ever seen. Oh my God! You mean it wasn't Rod this whole time? Of course, before we can be too shocked by that revelation, Tommy snatches up the machete and buries it in his head, because that worked so well in part 3. Of course, Tommy, being a horror geek, realizes that that isn't the end, and goes Danny Trejo on his ass, hopefully removing one shitty sequel with every swing of the machete. After that, we cut to later in the night, when Trish and Tommy share a tender moment at the hospital. Still, the crazed, haunted look in Tommy's eyes tells us that it might not be too long before a new breed of evil stalks Crystal Lake. Or who knows, maybe he's just gassy. Either way, that's Friday the 13th, the final chapter, and while most people consider it to be one of the better films in the franchise, I personally think it's more of a mixed bag. On the surface, there's a lot to recommend the final chapter. The greatest production values to date, some of the best special effects the series has to offer, and a more bang-for-your-buck attitude that's sure to please gorehounds. But there are also a few flaws that, for me at least, kind of hamstring the movie. And while we'll get to those in a moment, let's start with the positive. As I've said before, Savini is practically a god among the special effects community, and this movie shows us why. While other movies may have fairly obvious prosthetics, Savini's genius is such that there are some shots where I legitimately cannot tell without close examination whether it's a prosthetic or prop blade that's being used to achieve a given effect. Add to that some truly awesome sound design that makes every hit, chop, and slash feel as real as it looks, and it's no surprise that even the fell hand of the MPAA failed to dilute their effect. And then there are the small but important changes to Jason himself. If it was part 3 that gave Jason his look, it's part 4 that gives him his feel. Although it's more subtle than the transition from potato sack to hockey mask, veteran stuntman Ted White brought a sense of rage and a hulking physicality to the character that truly made him feel unstoppable, and which would influence every incarnation of the character from then on, especially that of fan favorite Kane Hodder. Although with the interviews I've seen, Ted White might be just as terrifying in real life as Jason is in the movies.
The only person that I didn't get along with or was afraid of was Ted White.
Couldn't stand him. I wanted to kill him desperately. My hands were my weapon of choice. Once I got my hands on him, the killing was easy then. I enjoyed chasing the girl. I loved the screaming and all the hollering. All it did was invigorate me.
Please don't hurt me when I meet you at the Horror Hound convention next month. Last of all, one of the cool things about horror movies is seeing unknowns that would later come into their own in early roles, and while the first had an awesome turn from Kevin Bacon, this film offers us the double whammy of a young Corey Feldman and the perpetually strange Crispin Glover. The others all do a decent job with what they're given, but... And that brings us to the downside of this movie, a problem that has plagued the series since part 1. While there's definitely both quantity and quality to be had in this movie's kills, that means that the final chapter has to keep a bigger stable of victims on hand, which conversely means that each of them has less on-screen time to actually make us give a crap about them. Take a look at the progression here in terms of the numbers of people that you would call main characters. In part 1 we have 7, in part 2 we have 9, by part 3 we're up to 11. In the final chapter we have Tina, Terry, Tommy, Trish, Teddy, Jimmy, Sarah, Sam, Doug, Paul, Rob, and Mom. A grand total of 12 people. And with the rather long intro with Axel and Nurse Robbie, which could bring the total to 14 if you think about it, it's 15 minutes before we can even start to introduce them. And that's in a film that lasts only an hour and a half. On top of that, the party's split, with the Jarvis family on one side and the party kids on the other, so both sides feel underdeveloped. Of the entire cast, I'm pretty sure Teddy and Jimmy's back and forth about his being a dead fuck give them the most lines of anyone at the party, and some characters, like Doug, seem almost entirely lost in the background. Even Trish and Tommy, who, as the survivors, should probably get the most screen time, are reduced to a few lines of dialogue apiece. On the whole, the film feels like it's desperately in search of an actual main character. And that brings us to the movie's second major failing, the fact that it focuses on the party kids rather than following the much more interesting stories contained therein. While the Friday the 13th formula was pretty well established by this point, the writers included several plot threads that, even though this was meant to be the last movie, could have taken this film in an interesting new direction. For example, the Jarvis family. We've already seen Jason stalk groups of partying teens, but why not show what happens when he comes up against a close-knit family that's willing to fight to the death to save one another? How cool would it have been if we saw Mrs. Jarvis as a woman every bit as dedicated to her children as Pam Voorhees was, and every bit as willing to kill to save them? And that's not even mentioning Rob. Rob was another huge opportunity for the series to do something new and innovative by following a character who's actively hunting Jason for vengeance. How cool would it have been to follow Rob as he found out the cops weren't going to keep looking for the killer, perhaps thinking that Axel and his girlfriend stole the body as part of a sick prank? You could have kept all the characters in kills, but maybe shown him struggling with the decision to use other human beings as live bait. Make him an Ahab. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's a movie that I'd pay to see. Missed opportunities aside, the final chapter was another huge hit with audiences, despite the typical panning from critics. The final chapter remains one of the highest grossing films of the franchise to this day, and because of that, it wouldn't be too long before audiences took another trip to Crystal Lake, proving that sometimes, even for a series, death truly is not the end. But that's a story for another day. Next time, I'll be revisiting another franchise that just won't die. Till then, this is the Fear Fan, signing out.
I'm bringing sexy back. Yeah. The mother boys don't know how to act. Yeah. I think it's special what's behind your back. Yeah. So turn around and I'll pick up the slack. Yeah.